You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. My name is David. I'm 39 years old and live in Boston. I'm a sales manager for a tech company, and I'd been on a work trip in London for the past few days. It was the kind of business trip that made you question your own career. Meetings all day, late-night dinners with clients, all the while stuck in a hotel room far from home. Tonight, though, I had nothing to do. I was in a nice hotel, the kind that tried to make you feel important, but everything felt empty. So I grabbed a cold beer from the mini fridge, turned on the TV, and let the silence of the room fill the space where my life used to be. There was a calmness about it, but also a loneliness. It was funny how the silence made me feel both isolated and free, like I could just breathe for a moment and forget about all the noise waiting for me at home. I was just starting to relax when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up, and I saw it was Catherine, my wife. I smiled a little. She'd been busy with work and had a million things going on at home, but it was nice to hear her voice, even if just for a few minutes. I swiped to answer and brought the phone up to my ear. "Hey babe," I said, trying to sound casual, but there was something in my tone that betrayed my exhaustion. "David," her voice came through, crisp and cold, like she was reading a script she had written in her head. "I need to tell you something." I sat up a little straighter, sensing something wasn't right. "What's going on?" I asked, my hand still holding the beer, but now forgotten on the nightstand. There was a long pause. Then she said it. "I'm leaving you," Catherine said, her words hanging in the air like bricks falling from a great height. "I'm leaving you for someone else." I could feel the blood drain from my face. The room seemed to tilt, but I didn't want to believe it. "What are you talking about?" I said, my voice coming out more strangled than I intended. "Is this some kind of joke?" "It's not a joke, David," she said, her voice now even colder. "I've been seeing someone, a business associate, and I'm pregnant. I'm keeping the baby." Pregnant. The word hit me like a ton of bricks. My mind was spinning, but I tried to remain calm. "Catherine," I said, my hand gripping the edge of the bed, trying to steady myself. "How long have you been—" "Doesn't matter," she cut me off sharply. "I've sold the house. I've sold the car. I've moved out. I'll be in touch about the rest of the details later, but I just wanted you to know, I'm done." I felt like the world had just been pulled out from under me. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. Before I could find the words, she ended the call with a click. Silence. Complete, overwhelming silence. I sat there for a moment, holding the phone in my hand. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Catherine, my wife of 11 years, had just told me she was leaving me for another man. She was pregnant with his child. And then, as if that wasn't enough, she had sold everything we had worked so hard for. The house, the car, everything. I had no idea what to do or where to go from here. But in that moment, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel anger or devastation. I didn't feel a rush of emotions like I thought I would. Instead, there was a strange numbness that settled over me. It was like I was floating above it all, watching it unfold from a distance. The coldness crept in, and a sense of determination replaced the shock. I looked out the window of the hotel room. It was dark outside, the city lights below barely visible through the fog, but I felt clearer than I had in months. That was the moment I knew. Catherine may have left me, but she hadn't taken everything. I still had control over one thing, myself. And I wasn't going to let her think she had won, not this time. I put the phone down slowly, took a deep breath, and stood up. The work trip, the meetings, the late nights, they all seemed trivial now. I had something else to focus on. The next steps weren't going to be easy, but I would make sure that I had the upper hand from here on out. After that phone call, I didn't know what to do with myself. Catherine's words kept echoing in my mind, but I pushed them away. I wasn't going to let myself break down. Not tonight. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up early, the weight of the situation still heavy in my chest, but not suffocating. I knew I needed to think. I needed to plan. Catherine may have blindsided me, but I wasn't going to let her dictate how this ended. I wasn't going to let her take everything, like she thought she could. I sat at the small desk in my hotel room, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank accounts. The first thing I did was look at our joint checking account. There was enough money in there to last us months, but I knew Catherine would try to clean it out. She always had a way of making everything about what she needed, without considering what I might want. But that was over now. With a few clicks, I transferred the bulk of the funds into a legal trust, one that Catherine couldn't access without going through a long, drawn-out process. The rest, I split between various accounts, each one locked down with passwords only I knew. It wasn't just about the money, though. I'd already arranged to secure the house and car. Those were assets I had the right to, and I wasn't about to let her sell them without a fight. Catherine had always been the one to make decisions, to dictate how things went, but now I was in control. She wanted a clean break, fine, but she would be the one to suffer the consequences, not me. I leaned back in the chair, my fingers still tapping on the desk. I'd covered my financial bases. Now, it was time to deal with the legal stuff. Catherine might think she had a plan, but she didn't know that I was already steps ahead of her. I picked up my phone and dialed Luke, my business partner. He'd helped me with a few legal matters before, and he'd been in the business long enough to know how to handle the mess Catherine was about to make. "Hey, Luke," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need your help with something. I need to make sure Catherine can't touch anything I have left. She's already made her move, and I need to lock things down." "Yeah, man, I figured this was coming," Luke replied, his tone serious. "I'll set up a meeting with my lawyer. We'll make sure everything is in place for you. Don't worry, you're covered." "Thanks, Luke, I owe you one." I hung up, feeling a small sense of relief. At least one part of this was taken care of. But I knew that Catherine would fight me on this. She was used to getting what she wanted, no matter the cost. That afternoon, I sat in the hotel room, sorting through everything I needed to do next. There were calls to make, legal documents to sign, things I'd never thought I'd have to deal with in a million years. But I had to think clearly, without emotion. This wasn't about her. It was about me getting back what I deserved. I glanced at my phone, checking the time. There was a part of me that wanted to call her, to scream at her for what she had done. But I knew that would only give her more power over me. I wasn't going to make that mistake. I wasn't going to let her see me as weak. Instead, I sent her a text, simple and direct. "I'm handling everything. You don't need to worry about the house, the car, or the accounts. I've taken steps to make sure you can't just take everything. We'll handle the rest through legal means. But don't think for a second that you have the upper hand here." It wasn't a message filled with anger, but with cold, calculated control. I wasn't going to beg her to stay, nor was I going to plead with her for a chance at reconciliation. I had already given her everything. Now, she would have to learn that I wasn't someone she could just walk all over anymore. I hit send, placed the phone down, and stood up. The weight still hung over me, but now it was more like a challenge. I had always let Catherine take the reins, but no longer. The next steps were mine to control, and I wasn't going to let her get away with this. The flight back to Boston felt like it took forever. The entire time, I couldn't stop thinking about Catherine's words. "I'm leaving you for another man." Every time the plane hit turbulence, I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. It wasn't just the physical movement. It was everything in my life that had been upended. I knew what was waiting for me back home. I knew that the second I stepped off the plane, I would have to face the fallout. But what I wasn't prepared for was what happened at the airport. I walked through the terminal, my steps measured, trying to keep my composure. There was no rush, no reason to show any emotion, no reason to let the world see how much it all hurt. I had taken control of everything I could, and now I just had to walk through the motions until it was over. Then, I saw her. Catherine stood by the baggage claim, her eyes wide as she scanned the crowd. She was wearing a light sweater, her hair pulled back in that way I used to like. But the sight of her made my chest tighten. Not with love, but with a cold, aching emptiness. She was still my wife, but she wasn't mine anymore. When she spotted me, her face softened, and she started walking toward me, her steps quickening. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the anxiety creeping into her expression. She was frantic, she was worried, but there was no hint of remorse. "David, where have you been?" she asked, her voice trembling. Her eyes scanned my face like she was searching for something. Regret, maybe? Guilt? But she wouldn't find it. I was numb, and I was fine with that. I took a deep breath and looked at her. "I've been where I needed to be." Catherine's lips parted as if she were about to say something else, but before she could speak, I brushed past her. I didn't even slow down. I couldn't. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me, not this time. Not after everything she'd taken. "David, please," she called after me, her voice strained, but I didn't stop. I just kept walking, pushing my way through the crowd, forcing myself not to look back. I heard her footsteps behind me, getting closer. David, please, I need to talk to you. Where have you been? Why haven't you answered my calls? I stopped walking, turned slowly, and met her gaze for the first time since I left London. Her eyes were pleading, searching for some kind of understanding, but I wasn't going to give her that. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me anymore. I looked at her, feeling the coldness settle deeper into my bones. I know everything, Catherine. I know about you and him. I know about the baby. And I know you sold the house. You've taken everything, but you won't take this from me. She blinked, her face pale, as if she hadn't expected me to be so calm, so unaffected. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off, my voice steady. You think I didn't see the signs? The late-night calls, the texts you kept hidden, the way you started pulling away? You thought I wouldn't notice? I shook my head, the numbness slowly turning to a quiet, steely resolve. I saw it, Catherine. I just chose to ignore it, but not anymore. I'm done. Catherine's eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite place. Hurt, maybe, or anger, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there, as if she were waiting for me to give her something she could use to make me feel bad. Well, what do you want from me now? I asked, finally breaking the silence. My voice was colder than I intended, but I didn't care. I wasn't here for her anymore. What do you want me to say? That I'll forgive you? That I'll let you walk all over me again? She hesitated, her lips trembling. David, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. It just happened. I raised an eyebrow. It just happened? You cheated on me and now you're pregnant with his child, and you think I'm supposed to just accept that? That's not how this works. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears starting to form in her eyes. But I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. I didn't feel anything for her. I looked at her one last time, taking in the woman I once loved, now nothing more than a stranger to me. She wasn't the person I had married, and she certainly wasn't the person I was going to allow back into my life. I don't want your apology, Catherine, and I don't want anything from you. This is over. You made your choice. I turned around and began walking away. There was no looking back, no more discussions, no more negotiations. She had made her decision, and now I was making mine. Behind me I could hear her calling my name, her voice desperate, but I didn't stop. This time, I was the one in control, and I wasn't going to let her pull me back into her web of lies and betrayal. As I walked through the airport, the weight in my chest lifted. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the beginning of something new. It had been 2 weeks since I saw Catherine at the airport, and things had gone exactly as I expected. She didn't try to reach out again, not directly. She probably thought that if she gave me space, I'd eventually come to her, apologizing for the mess I'd made. But I wasn't going to fall for that. No, she had made her bed, and now she was going to lie in it. I had already hired a lawyer, someone who specialized in divorce cases and asset disputes. I didn't trust anyone else to handle it. Luke had set everything up for me, and now it was time to take action. Catherine might have thought she had the upper hand, but she hadn't realized that I was already steps ahead of her. That morning, I sat in a small conference room, the cool metal of the table pressing into my arms as I waited for my lawyer, Dana, to arrive. She was sharp, experienced, and efficient. Exactly what I needed. When the door opened, she walked in, carrying a briefcase and her usual no-nonsense demeanor. "Morning, David," she said, sitting down across from me. "How are you holding up?" I gave her a tight smile. "Holding up fine. Let's just get to it. I'm ready to go after everything." Dana opened her briefcase and began spreading out papers, bank statements, transaction histories, and records of the assets Catherine had sold. Everything was there, neatly organized. She had already compiled a list of potential legal actions, including the fraud of selling assets that were legally mine, as much as they were hers. Catherine might think she could get away with it, but I was going to make sure that didn't happen. "Good," Dana said, glancing through the documents. "I've already contacted the bank and your real estate lawyer. We'll put a freeze on the accounts until we can sort out the asset division. As for the house, we'll fight to get it back. She can't just sell it without your consent." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. The thought of Catherine thinking she had outsmarted me, only to find out that I had already protected myself, made me feel like I had control again. "We'll also look into her business dealings with the other man," Dana continued. "If there's any evidence of financial manipulation, or if he's part of this scheme to take your money, we'll use it." I could see the determination in her eyes. Dana wasn't just doing her job. She was going to make sure I walked away with everything I deserved. I want to make sure she can't touch any of the joint assets, I said, my voice low but firm. She took everything she wanted, but she's not getting away with it. Dana raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Good. This is a solid case. And I'll make sure she understands that this isn't going to be easy for her. I leaned back in the chair, feeling a cold weight settle in my stomach. I wasn't just trying to protect my money or my house. I was doing this because I couldn't let her think she had won. I had been her doormat for too long, always trying to please her, always going along with her decisions. But this time, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my dignity, my peace of mind. I'll be here every step of the way, Dana said, flipping through the last few pages of the paperwork. You're not in this alone. I let out a breath, the tension in my chest easing just a little. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time since Catherine's phone call, I felt like I had some control again. As Dana packed up the files and we made plans for the next steps, I found myself thinking about the future. The legal battle wouldn't be quick, but I was prepared. It wasn't about money or revenge. It was about showing Catherine that I wasn't the same man who had put up with her lies and manipulations for so long. I was done being her backup plan. This time, the rules were different. This time, I was going to win. As I left the conference room, Dana handed me a thick envelope. This will be the formal filing. We'll make the first move tomorrow. Get ready for the fight. I nodded, taking the envelope from her. The next few months wouldn't be easy, but at least now, I was finally taking control, and I wasn't going to let her get away with what she had done. Not this time. A week had passed since I met with Dana, and everything had started to fall into place. The papers had been filed, the court motions had been set, and the assets were frozen. Dana was right when she said the case would be tough. But now I was moving through it with a cold, determined focus. But as things started to settle, Catherine's attempts to reach out became more frequent, more desperate. The first few days, I ignored her calls. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me, not anymore. But then came the voicemails. The first, a soft plea for understanding, followed by another, a more frantic one. I could almost hear her trying to hold back tears. The vulnerability in her voice was palpable, but I didn't let it affect me. By the fourth voicemail, she was begging for us to talk, to work things out. But I had already made up my mind. There was nothing left to say. Nothing could fix the lies and the betrayal. I didn't pick up. I didn't respond. I wasn't the man who would cave to her anymore. I was done. That night, as I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone, I received yet another message from her. It was a text this time. David, please. I never wanted it to be like this. Can we meet? I need to explain everything. Please, just a chance to talk. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I had no desire to meet with her, but part of me, a small part, still wanted to see her face to face, to hear her try to explain her way out of this mess. But I didn't need to hear her excuses anymore. I didn't need to give her that power. I tossed the phone onto the couch and let out a deep breath. This wasn't about closure. It was about standing my ground. It wasn't about what Catherine had to say. It was about me reclaiming my life. The next day, things took an unexpected turn. I walked into my office to find a letter from Catherine's lawyer, sitting neatly on my desk, alongside a copy of a settlement offer. I opened it with a sinking feeling in my stomach. It was exactly what I had expected. A low-ball offer. Catherine's lawyer wanted to settle quickly, get everything wrapped up with minimal fuss. She was probably hoping I'd take the deal, sign it, and walk away quietly. I could practically hear her voice in my head. Please, David, let's just move on. Let's not make this harder than it has to be. But I wasn't interested in moving on with her, not like this. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. I picked up the phone and dialed Dana. David, she answered quickly as though she'd been waiting for my call. How's it going? I just got her settlement offer, I said, feeling the anger rise in my chest. She thinks I'll just roll over and take this? Dana's voice was calm, but I could hear the edge in it. You don't have to take it, David. We're going to fight this. We can make sure she doesn't get away with what she's trying to pull. I won't sign it, I said firmly. But I need to know if she's bluffing or if this is part of her plan to get me to cave. I'll look over the offer, but I don't think she has much ground to stand on. We'll keep moving forward with our case. This is just her trying to control the narrative. I felt a brief moment of relief, knowing that Dana was on my side. She was going to make sure Catherine didn't get away with this. But that night, the calls started again. This time, Catherine didn't leave a voicemail. She was persistent, calling over and over until I finally decided to pick up. "David, please," she said, her voice tight and trembling. "I've been thinking about everything. I know I've hurt you, and I'm so sorry for what I've done. But this isn't the way I wanted things to end." I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to give her any of my energy, but I couldn't help myself. "You don't get to make the rules anymore, Catherine," I said, my voice cold. "You had your chance. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine." "I'm just asking for one more chance," she said, a hint of desperation in her voice. "Please, David, we can still work this out." But I was done. I had already made my decision, and I wasn't going to let her drag me back into her mess. I wasn't going to let her play me like she had before. "I'm not going to work things out with you," I said, cutting her off. "I'm not going to fix your mistakes. This is over." I hung up before she could say anything else. The next day, Catherine's lawyer reached out again, but this time, it wasn't to make another offer. It was to inform me that Catherine was going to try to contest the case in court. She wasn't going to make it easy, but it was too late. She had already shown me who she was, and now I was going to show her who I had become. The legal battle was just beginning, and I was ready to fight. Catherine had underestimated me, and I wasn't about to let her win this time. The weeks after Catherine's last desperate attempt to reconcile were quieter than I expected. The phone calls stopped, the voicemails tapered off, and the messages slowed to a trickle. But the silence wasn't peace. It was the calm before a storm I could already feel brewing in the distance. I had moved into a new apartment, a small one, but it was mine, and it was a fresh start. The first few days felt strange, like stepping into someone else's life. It wasn't the life I had expected. After all, I had planned to grow old in that house with Catherine, but now the silence in my new apartment was a constant reminder that I was no longer bound to her. I didn't know how long it would take to adjust, but it felt like I had all the time in the world. I kept myself busy. Work had picked up. The hours stretched long, and I didn't mind. If I wasn't at the office, I was at the gym or reading or sorting through my thoughts. I didn't have time to be distracted by Catherine's fallout anymore. But there were moments, brief flashes, when everything slowed, and I could almost feel her presence, like a shadow at the edge of my awareness. That was when the first cracks in her life started to show. It was subtle at first. I'd hear things through mutual acquaintances, whispers about how Catherine was having trouble with her new partner, or how her once bustling social media presence had begun to wane. A few of my old friends even told me she had been posting more desperate-sounding updates, talking about how hard things had become for her, and how she was struggling to find her footing. At first, I didn't think much of it. It wasn't my problem anymore, right? She made her choices, and now I had to focus on my own life. But still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was spiraling, and part of me, an unwelcome, bitter part, took some small satisfaction in it. Then came the call from Adam. Adam was Catherine's brother, and despite everything, I had always liked him. He wasn't perfect, but he was genuine, and I knew he had always looked out for her in his own way. The conversation started normal enough, just checking in to see how I was holding up. But it wasn't long before the tone shifted, and I realized why he was really calling. "David, I need to apologize for what Catherine's done," he said, his voice tight. "You didn't deserve any of this. You were always there for her, and I know you're hurting. I just want you to know that she's struggling." I sat up straighter, the phone pressed to my ear, my heart unexpectedly skipping. "I don't need her to apologize," I said, keeping my tone even. "I don't need anything from her anymore." "I know," Adam replied, his voice weary. "But she's not doing well. She's acting like everything's fine, but I can see it. She's isolating herself, and I don't know what to do. I think she regrets everything." I exhaled slowly, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her. I remembered the woman I had married, the woman who had once been so full of life, full of love. But the other part, the part that was still smarting from the betrayal, felt indifferent. "I'm not the person she should be talking to," I said after a beat. "She made her choices. She's the one who has to live with them." Adam was silent for a moment. "I get it, David, I do. But if you ever want to talk to her, you should know she's reaching out. She's just lost right now." I nodded, even though Adam couldn't see it. "I'll think about it," I said, the words coming out more out of obligation than genuine interest. I didn't owe her anything, but part of me couldn't help but wonder if, deep down, I was just waiting for closure, for something to make sense of all this. The next few days were a blur of work and restless nights. It wasn't until a few weeks later, on a rare Saturday when I wasn't buried in emails or appointments, that I found myself thinking about Catherine again. I had been avoiding her social media, not wanting to get sucked into any of her drama. But I couldn't stop the curiosity from creeping in. I'd heard enough through the grapevine. It wasn't hard to find her profile. Scrolling through her posts, I couldn't help but feel nothing. It was strange, almost unsettling. She posted pictures of herself alone, sad selfies, grainy photos taken on nights out with her new partner, attempts at showing a facade of happiness. But the posts felt empty. The captions, though hopeful, rang hollow. And there was one post in particular that made me pause. It was a photo of Catherine standing in front of a dimly lit coffee shop, her eyes tired and worn, a forced smile stretching across her face. The caption read, "Some days feel like everything is falling apart, but I'm trying to keep it all together, one step at a time." My heart did a strange flip in my chest. I thought back to the last time I had seen her, the coldness in her eyes when she walked away at the airport. But now, it was like I was seeing the cracks in her carefully constructed world. The woman who had always seemed so confident, so sure of herself, was now unraveling in front of everyone, trying to hold on to the illusion that things were fine, and part of me felt sorry for her. But not enough to reach out. The truth was, I had moved on. I had to. I was building something new, something just for me, a future that didn't include her. As much as I wanted to feel sympathy for Catherine, I couldn't forget what she had done. And deep down, I knew I was better off without her. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need anything from her anymore. It was her life to fix or to ruin, and I had my own to focus on. It was time to let go completely. A few weeks passed, and I focused on my life, carving out new routines and experiences. I wasn't thinking about Catherine anymore, not in the way I used to, at least. My days were filled with work, friends, and small pleasures that had nothing to do with her or the mess she had left behind. But even in the midst of this, a part of me knew that it wasn't truly over. There would come a time when Catherine would try again. She wasn't done yet. That time came on a Friday afternoon. I had just finished up a long meeting with a potential client when I checked my phone and saw a new text from an unknown number. I didn't recognize it at first, but then the name popped up, Catherine. I froze for a second. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't hesitate. I opened the message. "David, I know this might be the last thing you want, but I really need to see you. There's something I need to say, something I've never said before. Please meet me at the coffee shop where we first met. Just give me a chance to talk to you, please." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. After everything, she still thought she had the right to ask me for a meeting, to sit across from me like we could have a civilized conversation. The audacity of it shocked me, but at the same time, I couldn't deny the pull of curiosity. What could she possibly have to say that she hadn't already said? It would have been so easy to ignore the message, to delete it, and go on with my day like I had been doing for the past few months. But something inside me, maybe it was anger, maybe it was a lingering need for closure, made me want to hear her out one last time. I typed back one simple line, "I'll meet you, but this is the last time." Less than an hour later, I was sitting in a corner booth at the small coffee shop, where Catherine and I had shared so many quiet moments during the early days of our relationship. It felt like a lifetime ago. The dim lights and the quiet hum of the espresso machine surrounded me, but there was an unsettling stillness in the air. The place had changed since then. The warm glow I remembered was now muted, and the corner that had once been so familiar now felt like a stage for a final act. I didn't have to wait long. Catherine walked in, her steps hesitant, but she still had that grace about her. She wore a long coat that didn't quite hide the exhaustion in her face. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, as though she had spent the last few days crying, or maybe just holding everything in. She looked at me for a long moment, as though she was searching for something in my face, perhaps some trace of the man she had left behind. But I gave her nothing. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. She finally sat down across from me, folding her hands in front of her. She didn't speak right away, as if she was collecting her thoughts. "So," I said, keeping my voice calm, "what do you need to say?" Catherine blinked, her lips trembling. For a moment, she didn't seem like the woman who had walked away from me so easily, the woman who had betrayed me in the most brutal way. Now, she seemed small, vulnerable. It was almost enough to make me feel sorry for her. But I stopped myself. She didn't deserve my pity. Not anymore. David. Her voice cracked, and she paused, taking a deep breath. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can fix it. But I need you to understand something. I leaned forward slightly, keeping my expression neutral. You don't need to explain yourself. I know everything. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear there. You know? I nodded. I know about the affair. I know about the baby. I know about the house and the car. You didn't think I'd find out, but I did. Her hands clenched on the table, but she didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was barely above a whisper. I never wanted to hurt you, David. I didn't want any of this. It just happened. I shook my head. You're not the same person I married, Catherine. And I'm not the same person I was. I've spent too much time trying to make excuses for you, trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix. But now, I'm done. You made your choice, and so did I. Her face crumpled as she tried to hold back tears. David, please, I never wanted to lose you. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't think it would go this far. I looked at her, feeling the knot in my chest tighten. She had always been good at playing the victim, at making me feel like I was the one to blame. But not anymore. Not this time. It doesn't matter anymore, I said, my voice steady. You didn't just make a mistake, Catherine. You tore everything apart, and you can't come back from that. I can't come back from that. She swallowed hard, and I saw the tears begin to fall, but I didn't reach out to comfort her. I wasn't her safety net anymore. I wasn't going to catch her when she fell. I've hurt you so much, David, she whispered, and I'm sorry. I wish I could go back and fix it, but I can't, and I don't know how to make it right. You can't, I said, my voice cold but resolute. You had your chance, Catherine. I gave you everything, but you've made it clear that you didn't want it. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. She sat there, eyes red, tears staining her cheeks. But I didn't feel anything anymore. No sympathy, no anger. Just a cold emptiness that had started to fill the space between us. Goodbye, Catherine, I said, standing up and walking out of the coffee shop without looking back. I had closed the door on her once, and now I had closed it for good. It wasn't long after the final confrontation that I started to feel like myself again. The emptiness that had settled in after Catherine's departure, after everything I had endured, was slowly replaced with something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. I moved into my new apartment, small but mine. I didn't feel rushed to decorate or fill the space with things that reminded me of her. It was bare, the walls empty except for a few pieces of art I'd picked up in my travels, the only reminders of the life I had chosen for myself now. I liked it that way. The first few weeks were an adjustment. I spent long hours at work, finding solace in the routine. I buried myself in projects, in meetings, in managing my team. But after a while, it wasn't just work. It was a new kind of peace. On the weekends, I found myself reconnecting with old friends, people I hadn't seen in years. We grabbed beers at a bar, played some pool, laughed about things I hadn't thought about in ages. I didn't realize how much of my life I had sacrificed for Catherine, for a relationship that had left me drained and resentful. It felt good to let that go. It felt good to breathe again, without someone constantly pulling at me, asking for more than I had to give. One Saturday afternoon, a few months after the final confrontation, I was running errands when I ran into Bryce. He was the guy Catherine had left me for, the one who had replaced me in her life. I hadn't seen him since that night she told me she was leaving. We had never exchanged words, but seeing him now, in the middle of a small grocery store aisle, felt almost surreal. I stood there for a beat longer than I should have, staring at him, trying to place my thoughts. There was no anger, no resentment. He was just a man, a stranger who had unknowingly played his part in the end of my marriage. He looked up from the cans of soup he was choosing and froze when he saw me. There was a flicker of recognition, followed by awkward tension. I saw him shift, almost ready to turn and go, but he hesitated. His eyes met mine. "David," he said, a slight nervousness in his tone. I gave him a small, polite nod. "Bryce." We stood there for a moment in the quiet hum of the store, neither of us knowing what to say. Part of me expected the conversation to be charged with some kind of bitterness, maybe even a fight, but it wasn't. There was no need for it. I was past that. "Good to see you," I said, the words coming out naturally, without any edge to them. You're doing okay? He seemed caught off guard, as though he expected some kind of confrontation. Yeah, I'm doing fine. He cleared his throat. I know we didn't really get the chance to talk before. I raised an eyebrow. Not much to talk about, I said simply. You and Catherine, you made your choices, and I made mine. There was a silence that passed between us, but it wasn't the kind of silence that felt hostile or heavy. It was just there. Two men standing on opposite sides of a chapter that was now closed. He shifted awkwardly, and then, to my surprise, he extended his hand. Look, David, I just wanted to say, I never meant for things to go down the way they did. I never wanted to hurt you. I stared at his outstretched hand for a moment before I took it and gave it a firm shake. It's in the past, I said. You don't need to explain. We both got what we needed in the end. Bryce nodded, looking a little relieved. Yeah, I guess we did. And with that, the conversation ended. We parted ways in the aisle, each of us continuing with our day as if it were just any other ordinary encounter between strangers. It wasn't a closure that felt dramatic or climactic. It was just two people acknowledging the past and moving on. Later that afternoon, I met up with Luke at a local bar. We sat outside on the patio, drinking beers and talking about the progress on the business side of things. For the first time in a while, it wasn't just about work or the past. It was about the present, the here and now, the moment when everything felt like it was falling into place. I ran into Bryce today, I said casually, swirling the beer in my glass. Luke looked up at me, his eyes scanning my face. Oh yeah? How'd that go? I shrugged, taking a sip of my drink. Fine. Weird, but fine. We didn't fight or anything. Just awkward. Guess you're past it then? Luke asked, leaning back in his chair with a grin. You've been on fire these last few months, man. Getting your groove back? I nodded slowly. Yeah, I think so. I've got a lot more room to breathe, you know? I don't have to answer to anyone anymore. It's just me now. Luke raised his glass, offering a small toast. To freedom, then. To freedom, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. As we sat there, I couldn't help but think about how far I had come. The man I was now was different from the man who had stood in that coffee shop months ago, hoping for some kind of closure or apology. I didn't need that anymore. I didn't need Catherine or Bryce or anyone else to define who I was or what my life should look like. I had found peace, and it was mine to keep. No more baggage, no more second guessing. Just forward. And with that, I felt like I was truly moving on. It had been nearly 6 months since that last meeting with Catherine, since the final confrontation in the coffee shop. The dust had settled, and life had continued. I had grown stronger, more confident, and more focused than I ever thought possible after everything that had happened. My business was thriving, my social life was expanding, and, most importantly, I had finally found peace with myself. I wasn't weighed down by the past anymore, but just when I thought it was truly over, Catherine found one last way to reach out. It was a letter tucked inside an envelope with her name written in familiar handwriting. When I saw it, my stomach tightened. I hadn't heard from her since our final conversation, and I had expected it to stay that way. For a moment, I wondered if I should even open it. Maybe it was some sort of last-ditch apology. Maybe she was trying to convince me to talk again. But I tore open the envelope anyway. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, its edges slightly frayed, as though it had been written some time ago and then tucked away in her desk for longer than it should have been. The letter was brief, but every word hit me harder than I thought possible. David, I know we don't speak anymore, and I understand why. I hurt you in ways I can never undo. I'm writing this letter not to ask for forgiveness, but because I need you to know something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. The truth is, I was scared. I was scared of what would happen if I let myself fully love you. Scared of what would happen if I let go of the parts of me that were holding me back. I made terrible choices, and I hurt you, and for that, I'll always regret it. You were everything I needed, David, and I pushed you away. I know that now. I never wanted to leave you. I thought I could keep everything, Bryce, the life I was trying to build, and still have the life I had with you. But I couldn't. I was wrong. I see that now, and I see everything I lost by being so selfish. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't know if you'll ever even want to speak to me again. But I wanted you to know that I am sorry. from the bottom of my heart. I hope you find everything you deserve, even if that's not with me. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I ruined it. Take care, David. I'll never forget you. I read it 3 times before I could process it all. The anger I had once felt wasn't there anymore. Instead, I felt something different. A sense of finality. A sense of closure that had been absent in my life for so long. The words weren't what I had expected. There was no plea for us to work things out. No demands for forgiveness. It was just her truth, raw and unapologetic. I sat there for a long time, letting the weight of her words sink in. Catherine was still the same person I had once loved, flawed, afraid, and ultimately human. But that was the problem. She was still making excuses for her choices, and I couldn't keep living in her shadow. I'd let go of her a long time ago, and reading this letter didn't change that. It didn't bring back the woman I had married or the life we had built together. It just confirmed everything I had already known. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the coffee table. For a moment, I stared at it, but the urge to respond, to open the door to more communication, wasn't there. I had already closed that door. This was the end. I grabbed my phone and typed a quick response. Something simple, something that would put the last of my feelings to rest. I appreciate your letter, Catherine. I don't have anything else to say. I've moved on. I hope you find what you're looking for. It wasn't an invitation to start over. It wasn't even an attempt to resolve anything. It was just me acknowledging that her letter, her apology, had been enough for me to know that I had done everything I needed to do to move forward. I pressed send and put the phone down. A strange sense of peace washed over me. It wasn't relief or happiness. It was just quiet. The kind of quiet I had been craving since everything fell apart. I was no longer bound to her past, to our past. There was nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to regret. I had finally severed the last tie that had been holding me back. That night, I went out with Luke to grab drinks at the same bar we'd gone to so many times. The chatter around us, the laughter, and the easy conversation all felt right. It was the life I was meant to have, not the one Catherine had promised me, but the one I had built for myself. I didn't need her. I didn't need any of them. I had everything I needed right here, my friends, my career, and most of all, the peace I had fought so hard to find. As I looked around the bar, I realized something. The past had been a part of me, but it no longer controlled me. I wasn't the same person who had sat there alone, questioning what had gone wrong. I wasn't the person who had been so lost in Catherine's web that I couldn't see the world around me. Now, I was free. For the first time in a long time, I smiled, not because of anything or anyone, but because I had finally found my own way forward, and I was done looking back.